All right, welcome on into the KSL Sports front page. Big thanks to Tom Hackett and Trevor Allen for navigating the first part of this kind of two-part front page edition that we got brought to you by University Federal Credit Union. I'm BYU insider Mitch Harper, and joined today by KSL Sports digital producer Kyle Ireland. Kyle, how's your Friday going?
Hey, I can't complain. I mean, we have NBA basketball back. I was able to watch a couple games last night and haven't been able to do that in many months. So it's been good. I've been enjoying just kind of just soaking it all in. Even had League Pass on earlier for the Magic game. I mean, I never thought that I'd be excited to watch an Orlando Magic game, Mitch, but I was today. So it was good.
Truer words have not been spoken there, Kyle, and we will definitely be talking some NBA as the Jazz got the restart rolling in Orlando with a big win over the Pelicans. We'll discuss that. Some NBA ratings. The numbers are in. Kind of surprising, some of the numbers. We'll look at that a little bit further. Also, BYU and the Big 12. It's a talking point that will never die. We'll hit on that. What does it all mean? We'll share with that. And then also Major League Baseball. It might be done before it ever really truly got rolling. So we'll start things off, though, in the NBA, Kyle. As you mentioned, the Jazz get the big win over the Pelicans, 107-105. And I got to say, at the end of the game, Zion Williamson, he had that stretch where he was out of the game, and you looked at a lot of reports, and some people are saying if Zion would have played in that stretch, it would have been a different outcome for the Pelicans. But honestly, I thought defensively, Zion struggled, but one of the best guys in the court, once again, Donovan Mitchell, who really took over in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, Donovan was excellent in the fourth quarter. I mean, he struggled really. I mean, the majority of the team struggled in the second and third quarter. I thought the Jazz came out and for the first 5 minutes or so looked really good. And I was like, okay, like this is kind of what you wanted to see after, they got their feet underneath them with those scrimmages with those early scrimmages and those second and third game against the Heat and the Brooklyn Nets. So it was a really good start for the Jazz, but then they really just kind of faltered there late in the first quarter and into the second quarter. We're down double digits at halftime. And then the third quarter, you saw a few times where the Jazz, they opened the second quarter. Rudy Gobert had that massive block on Zion. And you kind of thought, hey, this team's kind of coming to, make a run at this score and really kind of get back in the game. And then the Pelicans, Drew Holiday was excellent last night. He made a run of his own. And so the Jazz were really fighting there up until the fourth quarter. But then once the fourth quarter started, my gosh, they really locked down on defense. Zion didn't play for the last 7 minutes or so. And then Rudy Gobert was just outstanding on defense and then, had clutch free throws in the final seconds of the game. But Donovan Mitchell really, put this team on his back there in the fourth quarter. He scored 8 of Utah's final 10 points. And really, you want to have a guy, especially when I feel like these 8 seeding games, Mitch, we're really talking about playoff basketball right here, right? I mean, these guys are fighting for their playoff seeding, but you're also talking about, this is really a new season and it's coming down. I like to think of this more as like the first round, even though you're not playing the same opponent in each of these games. But I mean, it felt like a playoff basketball game last night, and Donovan Mitchell showed up like it was playoff basketball, and he really was outstanding yesterday.
This is KSL Sports front page. Mitch Harper, Kyle Ireland. If you're watching this, make sure to like the Facebook page. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. We do this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And share your comments. We're watching it live. We can see the comments coming in. We got the links in the comments to the stories that we're discussing here on the screen. So make sure to interact with us, and we'll discuss your questions and comments as well. Again, this show is brought to you by University Federal Credit Union. And last night, it did feel a little bit like playoff basketball, Kyle, and the Jazz are currently 2 games out from the 2 seed in the Western Conference. And that game against the Pelicans got things going in the restart, and the TV ratings are in 2.1 million viewers, which was pretty much double, a typical game broadcast on TNT. Clearly, fans were very excited to see the NBA back after a 4.5-month layoff.
Yeah, and I think that this is just a trend that we're going to continue to see as these sports ramp back up. Obviously, you look at Major League Baseball, their opening game with the Nationals and Yankees, that blew up and just had record numbers as well. I mean, the NWSL just down the road in Harriman, the record numbers that CBS had for that game as well. I mean, people are just so excited to have sports back. And yesterday it was great. I mean, you had Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, 2 All-Stars up against Zion Williamson, who's, first round number 1 overall pick. And, everybody's waiting to see if the Pelicans can make the playoffs and, make it so that they're within that 4 games to be able to have a play-in game. So there's some intriguing lineups there and matchups. And then you've got the Lakers versus the Clippers, the 1 and the 2 seed as the second game. I just thought it was an excellent opening night for the NBA. The fact that both games were competitive down to the stretch. I mean, 1 possession game there for the Jazz at the end. Rudy Gobert steals it with free throws, and then LeBron James, obviously still LeBron James, still King James, had an amazing putback, excellent defense on Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. If anybody hasn't seen that play by LeBron, I thought LeBron was outstanding last night. I mean, we can move aside from the Jazz for just a second. LeBron was amazing last night. I'm not a Laker fan, so I know that the majority of the state wasn't happy with that result. But I think it was just crazy to see. It's interesting, Mitch. You've had 4.5 months of no basketball. A lot of these guys have been able to heal up, haven't had that kind of a break before a playoff basketball, environment has occurred, right? And so everybody kind of is like trying to make it to the end of the season just to be able to play playoff basketball. Now these guys have had all this time off. A lot of them have come back in shape. And you look at these games that we've had so far, I mean, it's been great basketball. You see these athletes at the peak of their powers, and you've got, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, these guys that, we want to see perform at the highest levels. You're seeing that right now. And I think that we'll continue to see that into the playoffs. And once the actual playoffs start, I think you'll see it ramp up another notch. But I think that's great for the sport and something that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, the NBA has really got off to a good start with the restart. And the thing is, too, is most important thing is the COVID-19 tests have been pretty much non-existent the last couple of weeks. There's been 0 positive tests. So the NBA, their bubble concept of basically closing everything off to the outside world, it's working thus far. Major League Baseball, not working as well. St. Louis Cardinals, Milwaukee Brewers game postponed after 2 employees test positive. And a little bit before this program went on the air, Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, also put out commentary that there's a possibility the season could shut down this year if this continues to have outbreaks. Is Major League Baseball done before it really ever got started?
Yeah, I think it is. Just my personal opinion. I look at what's happening in Major League Baseball, and then I look at the comparison to what's happening in these other sports that have had bubble environments where they've had things locked down. And there's a stark contrast. You're seeing no tests in the bubble environment, and you're seeing positive tests in Major League Baseball. They thought that they could do it similar to a normal season, just not have fans involved, and it's clearly not working. And so what I really think, I think Major League Baseball at this point, the season's over. Right? It's just a matter of time before they shut things down. I don't see how they can backtrack. You saw another Marlins player after the Brewers Cardinals game was postponed today, that another Marlins player tested positive for COVID-19. They're up to 18 players now. And it's just, when you start to have one thing like this, it's just one domino after another. It's a trickle effect, and it's just really hard to stop. And so I think that Major League Baseball is kind of doomed for 2020. But what I think that this is a really interesting example of is, college football and the NFL are, right around the corner. And so how does not having a bubble environment impact those sports? I have a hard time seeing the non-bubble environment here clearly not working. And then if football, both professional and collegiate, are not going to have bubble environments, I just have a hard time seeing how the outcome is going to be different than what Major League Baseball is experiencing right now. Whereas you have the WNBA, you have the NBA, you've had Major League Soccer, NWSL, all of these other sports that have been super successful with it. You've got the NHL, which is starting up with their playoffs. The Stanley Cup playoffs start tomorrow. And so if you see the same kind of thing happen in bubble environments across all of these different sports, all of these different leagues, and then you have one sport who's not doing it clearly in a bubble environment, I just have a hard time believing that the results are going to be different in football.
For all of you watching, share a GIF of your optimism level for Major League Baseball to be potentially finished. Share it in the comments.
Sorry, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here, Mitch. I don't mean to be super pessimistic, but
I think Major League Baseball is trending towards being shut down. I'm with you. I think it's trending that way. I hope they can find a way
Yeah.
to make it work. The problem with Major League Baseball is that their leadership has just been terrible throughout the whole process. Commend Manfred for being able to get the season off the ground when everyone thought it was going to be the first season without a Major League Baseball since 1994 when the strike season happened. So credit for him to get the season to happen. But at the end of the day, there's been no leadership in Major League Baseball. Earlier this week, they said there's no conversation of having the season shut down. And then today, there's now potentially the conversation to shut it all down. So again, Major League Baseball just has these ebbs and flows that are just so frustrating. And if you're a diehard Major League Baseball fan out there, you got to be frustrated with that product because it continues to lose a little bit of relevance by every single head-scratching move and lack of leadership that we see with Major League Baseball. College football is another sport that lacks a lot of leadership. You've seen that with these decisions in the sport where each and every league is making their own moves in this conference-only landscape. 4 of the 5 Power 5 conferences have made their announcements as to what they're going to do with college football this fall. The one conference that's left the door open is the Big 12 Conference. Now, yesterday, Kyle, a lot of people in Big 12 country, some Texas media members, some West Virginia media members, a lot of people looked at the situation and go, okay, Big 12 needs a 10-game schedule just like their Power 5 peers. You got 10 teams in the league. You can't do a 10-game schedule. Who would be the team that could fill the gap for 1 year and bring a 10-game schedule? Who could that be? BYU. They could fill that gap quite nicely because the Cougars have lost so many games. They've lost 6 games now on their 2020 football schedule because of these conference-only decisions. And, of course, the Big 12 Conference, do they do things that operate in a way that makes sense? Absolutely not. Last night I put up this piece that BYU partnering with the Big 12 would be a dream scenario. It truly would be a dream. Unlikely, but a dream. And then the reality came into a little bit more focus today as the Dallas Morning News reported that BYU and the Big 12 for 1 year, there's no chance. Quote, Matt Mosley from the Dallas Morning News, BYU football to the Big 12 this season was a fun idea. The conference source tells me there's no chance. Typical things in 2020 have been crazy, Kyle, but some things never change, and that's BYU not having a seat at the Big 12 table.
Yeah, I mean, BYU didn't have any favors done to them by the Big 12 a few years ago, and I think that the result's going to be the same now. Maybe if Tom Homo were to go and put down, a really nice presentation in front of Bob Bowlesby and the presidents, right? I mean, maybe that would convince them. No, I'm just kidding. It's not going to happen. Sadly enough, BYU is just in a really tricky situation, and the Big 12, as much as it would be a nice fit, it always seemed like the hardest or most difficult option here for the Cougars to be able to kind of have something finalized for this 2020 schedule. You look at Notre Dame and the ACC. I know as much as BYU fans want BYU to be a Notre Dame type independent, that's just not who BYU is, and it's probably never who BYU is going to be. And so it was a dream scenario like you wrote about. And I mean, I know that that's yesterday's news now, but BYU fans should go take a look at that article. As much as one of those paragraphs is kind of irrelevant today, Mitch, I thought you did a nice job on that article. And, there's some other, interesting paragraphs and aspects there that you set up for BYU as a potential, schedule is concerned. But I think that it's just interesting. BYU is in such a tricky scenario. And what I am interested in seeing is if the Big 12 ends up making a similar move as the other Power 5 conferences have done, I just have a hard time believing that the G5s aren't going to follow suit. I mean, if the Big 12 does it, all the Power 5s have done the same thing with the non-conference schedules for 2020. You look at the American Conference and the Mountain West, I just have a hard time believing that they won't follow suit. And then that takes another few games off of BYU's schedule as well. And that would just really be difficult for BYU to have really such a great schedule, 3 months ago, before, all this kind of really has really kind of one domino after another fallen. You look at BYU and, being able to have teams like Utah State, Boise State, Houston still on the schedule. I mean, those are still good games considering they don't have any Power 5s anymore. But I'm interested to see what you think happens, Mitch. Do you think that BYU is going to lose those other G5 games as well? Is this going to go where they're not playing G5s? Are they just going to be looking at an independent schedule? Or are they going to be looking at, where they play multiple teams twice in the season to try and fill out a schedule?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best case scenario for BYU is keeping these games that you see on the screen right here, keeping these games and then somehow filling the gaps with the independents like Liberty, like Army, and UConn. Because I think with Group of 5 teams, losing out on Power 5 opponents in those big paydays is going to hurt the bottom line of these athletic departments, and losing those big paydays. It's just going to hurt them, and they got to maybe look somewhere else. BYU, not as rich as the Power 5 programs, but still might have the means necessary to pay a program to recuperate some of the losses, to say, come out to Provo, we'll pay you, we'll play him in Provo, give ESPN the inventory, and you can fill the gaps there. So I think if you can incentivize these teams that you're seeing on the screen, except North Alabama, who cares about them? I don't care to play North Alabama, but the 5 FBS teams, play those games. That's a nice starting point, and then you get to those independent-only teams, and maybe you start entertaining the thought of home and homes with some of the independent-onlys. Now, honestly, Kyle, it's not ideal. And the thing is that what could be really disappointing for BYU is that, what if the Big 12 Conference goes to conference-only +1? It's possible, because we've seen Oklahoma schedule Missouri State. We've seen Kansas schedule, Southern Illinois, something like that, an FCS team for August 29th. But what could be an issue is that, that partnership with ESPN doesn't get BYU any games. Maybe those Big 12 teams go to regional matchups, and that's very possible. But I feel like what's going to happen, Kyle, is that BYU heads to a situation where it goes to just independent-only games. And there's no reason to blame BYU for this pandemic. No one could have seen this coming. This is not BYU's fault. The problem that's going to happen, Kyle, I feel, is that this will be a real negative indictment on independence. And because playing a schedule lumped in with Liberty, Army, UMass, New Mexico State, college football is built around perception. And the perception being lumped in with those programs is not a good look for BYU. Whether it's right or wrong, it'll be a negative indictment on independence. Now, I'm of the belief you stay the course as an independent and you don't leave. But maybe you have a little bit better argument to say you need to have that protection with a league, whether it be the AAC, whether it be the Mountain West Conference in the future. I hope and pray we never see a pandemic like this again to rock another college football season potentially. But if that day came, maybe BYU needs to have the protection of a conference, because the ESPN conference, the BYU TV conference, it's not protecting anyone. And BYU is now down 6 games, and they're wondering, are we going to have a football season? The worst thing for BYU would be everyone in college football is playing, and the Cougars can't put together a season because their independent-only programs are not able to financially maybe make a season happen. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But I think BYU is going to do everything in their power to make sure this season goes off the ground. It's not going to be a fault of BYU. They'll make it happen if they can. They're not going to cut any corners. But again, the powers that be in college football, BYU doesn't have a voice at the table or the virtual table. And if without those virtual Zoom call conversations and having a voice, you're kind of left in the dark, waiting for everyone else to make decisions. So this Group of 5 conferences, I would assume next week, are going to be kind of really telling to what we might see potentially for BYU football in 2020.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, how if it does go independent only for BYU on their schedule, does BYU find a way to get, some pros out of this con? And what I mean by that is, can BYU get the majority of their games on their schedule, not just half, but the majority of their games at home to play at LaVell Edwards Stadium? Because I look at those independents, Mitch, and BYU's probably the best suited and the most well set of all those programs, right? Not only financially, but just in the landscape of college football. And so I'm interested to see, if BYU can get all of those independents on the schedule, but then also say, hey, we're going to have you and we'll pay you, but you're coming to Provo. And so that would not only alleviate some of the financial burden on BYU, not to only travel, but then to also, that they can kind of keep that testing with the players and everything, all of the personnel, all of the guys that you have to send out to all these away games, not only just the team. I think that really could bode well for BYU out of such a negative situation. I think that could end up being a positive that the Cougars could look at and say, you know what, the season wasn't what we wanted it to be, and the schedule isn't what we wanted it to be, but like there is some light at the end of the tunnel here where not everything's bad about this. I just think that there's ways for BYU to find some positives out of it, and I'd be interested to see if Tom Homo is able to set up a schedule like that to be able to have the majority of the games played at LaVell Edwards Stadium.
It's still very possible that we don't see college football at all this season, Kyle. And
Yeah.
I honestly wonder if BYU is, in a way, maybe cheering for that. I don't think they are. I mean, they want to play the games. I know that. But you almost wonder, I mean, optics would be really bad if BYU can't have a season and other programs do. And then if that did happen, that doomsday scenario, you wonder, do guys that are graduated, like a Matt Bushman, like a Zane Anderson, do they go into the portal to get a shot at a P5 school and just to play? Because that might have to be entertained by those guys if they truly want to improve their NFL draft stock and have a chance to play professionally. So there's a lot of moving variables, but that's kind of a doomsday scenario, but we'll keep a track of all of it here at KSLSports.com. For Kyle Ireland, Mitch Harper, we enjoyed this. KSL Sports Front Page, always brought to you by University Federal Credit Union. We'll be back on Monday here on Facebook Live on KSLSports.com.